thanks the organizers for inviting me here. And I will speak in English, even though it's my second language. I hope you will understand. As Ephraim said, also my parents are from Germany, so that's my German connection. But in my history, I was in the MOD responsible for R&D relations with Germany in certain fields. And then I was the science attaché of Israel in Bonn for a very interesting period between 88 and 92. So that was prior and after reunification. And we will mention that also afterwards. One anecdote for Jürgen from the military history. That was in the 80s. We had very extensive relations with the German army and German Ministry of Defense. And one day there comes a delegation for Germany. We are quite young officers. They are grown-ups. We look at them, we know that they were in World War II. And one of them came to me and said, you know, when I came here, I was very afraid. I wandered in the streets of Tel Aviv. Nobody shouted at me. Nobody hit me. I bought food in the restaurant. Everybody knows I'm German. Nobody said anything. And I'm surprised. How can it be? So Jürgen, you don't have to be afraid. Here, people not only welcome people from Germany, but many of us speak German. So it's very easy for Germans to get along in Tel Aviv and in Israel. Okay, I want to go back to 1958. 1958, from the research or science point of view, a group of scientists from Weizmann Institute went to Germany to meet German scientists. So 7 years before the diplomatic relations, 10 or 11 years, 13 years after end of World War II, the first scientific group that comes from the West to Germany are Israelis. And this is a very significant point in the history of science of Germany after World War II. So significant that because of that, Germany decided to sign many agreements of research cooperation with Israel, which not only
science is always, technology is always a problem.
זה מדלג. It's so significant that הבא אחריו, ולא זה. Never mind. תשאיר את זה פה. That Germany decided to grant Israel with much money, many research grants in very, very special grant programs. The first one was mentioned this morning is the Minerva Fund that granted money especially for the Weizmann Institute, but afterwards also to all other universities in Israel. And many students go today through this fund to do postdocs in Germany. The Ministry of Science and the Ministry of Science in Israel and in Germany signed a different research cooperation program through which special fields of science and technology are cooperatively researched. One very important, a very important one is the cancer field. Afterwards, Minerva began to finance research centers in universities in Israel. Some of them exist also here in Bar-Ilan University. And the principle of all these agreements is that these are lifelong cooperation agreement. So you take 1, 2, 3 million euro, you create a fund which is invested usually in Israel, in the Israeli National Bank, for lifelong period. And the idea of the Germans by doing that is they didn't want anybody who will come later after them to be able to cancel the program. If it is for 1 year, for 2 years, for 3 years, it is easily stopped. But if it is a contract which is lifelong, it's much more difficult to cancel it. So today we have many like that. Later you would hear about a big fund which is called the GIF, German-Israel Foundation. Then there was the DIP, Deutsche-Israelische Programm. Much money goes between Israel and Germany today to fuel this kind of cooperation. Last but not least is, of course, the very good cooperation Israel and Germany have in the EU program, which is a new kind of cooperation Israel is involved in. And Germany is one of the countries who backs the inclusion of Israel in this program. Otherwise, there are other European countries that are not so fond of this involvement. So far, some history of the relations between Israel and Germany. I will speak now more from my personal view or experience. Project that I was involved in, you will get some idea of what we are doing with Germans, and some of the results of these cooperations. You have here a list, a long list of projects that we were involved in, beginning with foresight, forecasting. I will say a word about it in a minute. Security research, the future of privacy, security in airports, very relevant to what happens today in Europe. Terrorism on the internet, and many others. And we'll give some taste of some of these projects so we can feel them. I came to Germany in '88 to be the science attaché in Germany. And one thing which was very felt when we came, all Israelis, not only me, is the fact that all the Germans are going with money in their pockets. It's very difficult to take money out of the wall, as we do in Israel. Telecommunication is not as we were used to here in '88. In Germany, they defined it as if they didn't recognize what we call the information revolution or the information age. Somehow they surpassed it. Now for Germany, which is a very advanced economic industrial country, it was a big failure. And they decided to do everything in their power to do in order to not to be mistaken again. Not to miss the other future technological revolutions. And one way is to implement what we call foresight or forecasting. Sometimes these words are interchanged. Technology assessment. All these methodologies that are helping you to forecast the future. One of the researchers in Bar Ilan, or there is also some people there are also people in Bar Ilan who are doing that until today. So here you have a sketch of what we mean. There are many futures. We choose one of them. The decision maker usually will choose one of them. We'll study the impact of this future on the present, and we'll try to draw a relevant policy in every field he wants. It is security, economy, science and technology, so on and so forth, in order to come to that forecasted future prepared. Otherwise, as happens now in Paris, Brussels, and so on, you are not prepared, and then you have to cope with the results. You are always surprised. And also in Israel, we are surprised every time again and again because it's very difficult to forecast the future, as you know. Germany decided to study this methodology and then implement it. A small story. They began by cooperating with Japan. Japan is very known for doing future research from very early. And they did a big expert survey in Germany and in Japan on future of technologies. One topic that was researched was, when will robots operate in our homes? When will mothers use robots in order to nurse their children? The Japanese said that was 1990. The Japanese said 2000 year and on. The Germans, most of them said never, and if yes, only 20 years later, 2030. Now you see here a cultural difference, which is very understandable. A German woman could not understand how a robot can do her jobs. Of course, today it's quite different, but that was the gap between a country in which future research was very advanced and a country in which future research was just in its beginning. So we were called together with the German to try and define all the terms connected with this field: foresight, forecasting, technology assessment, and the result is that foresight was focused mostly on national policies in very far futures, 10, 20 years. Forecasting was focused more on industry in short-term development of technologies. You know, in industry, it's always 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, not much more than that. And technology assessment bridge between these two, because you always try to analyze new technologies to see what they will bring to. Here you can see why you need forecasting or foresighting or whatever in order to be better prepared for your future. And it doesn't matter in which domain you operate. That was 92, 93. Another method that began to develop then was the method of wildcards and weak signals. And the idea is very simple. Instead of analyzing too much, let's put on the paper every wild scenarios, and here in MOD we are very used to that. Put on paper many wild scenarios, and a wild scenario we mean something that is with very low probability but a very high impact. Let's say a nuclear bomb on Rome. I don't say on Tel Aviv because who knows what the Iranians are planning. So you try to look on scenarios in every field possible, put them on paper, try to understand what they mean, and see if you can be prepared for that or not. You know, the Ayalon River in Tel Aviv, they say that once every 20 years it will overflow, and that's why they planned the Ayalon highway like they planned it, and the river decided to overflow every 3 years, and now every 3 years, sometimes even every 2 years, we have to drive through water. So that's a kind of surprise that nobody was prepared for. Let's see on, and weak signals accompanying to that are events or any other signal you can imagine. 5 minutes?
Time is flying when you have fun.
Okay. Every other signal you can imagine that gives you some idea that this wildcard that you thought about is realized. So let's see some of these. For example, new pro-war president is elected in the US. Now, all these that I show you are things that are written by Germans, Israeli, English people who were part of this group who thought about these things. It was done 4 years ago, so you should look at it in some perspective. Israel and Palestine are admitted to the EU. 4 years ago, they still saw that peace is very near. And that's an incentive for peace that EU leaders might think about. Invisibility spray available in Boots. Boots are these shops in England, I think, that you can buy everything you want. And invisibility spray are this chemical that will enable you to be a kind of Harry Potters. And it's not a joke, it's something that is developed, and there are some traces of this kind of materials that would make it possible. Major EU state elects a neo-fascist leader. I think this already happened. Huh? Floods in Europe cause mass migration. Inner cities are closed for private cars. And first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. These are only part of 100 wildcards like that that were written, invented in that project. Now I have -1 minute, so I don't speak about security threats, but most of the lecture had to be devoted to weak signals and scenarios of future security threats. That again, a project done with a group from the Technical University of Berlin. It was done under the framework of the EU in the first round of security calls, and was an input to the EU to plan or plan policies, how to cope with future security threats in the EU. Unfortunately, it seems that it wasn't very much implemented. So we run through the, so there are robotics, biotechnology threats, nanotechnology threats, synthetic biology as the major development in biotechnology in the coming years, which will create many opportunities for terrorists to create new biologicals. I'll tell you about invisibility cloaking. Not a joke. These are materials that are under development. You can see how these threats might develop in the future. And since it's Hanukkah next week, we might help to expel darkness. Thank you.
Miracles